Cooking at home is the key to eating healthier and saving money. But with so many kitchen gadgets out there, it's easy to waste money on things you might not actually need. The right tools, however, can make cooking easier, more enjoyable, and actually help you stick to healthy eating. So today, instead of just listing a bunch of random must-have tools that I happen to have affiliate links for in the description, I'm going to talk to you today about how to think about setting up your kitchen to make healthy eating more effortless for you. And at the end, I'm even going to break down an example of how much this would cost you up front and how much that would compare to you spending that same amount of money on takeout. So when it comes to the kitchen setup, I want to work backwards from the different kinds of foods that you're going to need to cook. And then from there, figure out what are the best tools in order to cook those specific foods and ingredients. So generally we have 4 main categories of foods that we're going to be eating: carbs, veggies, proteins, and fats. And for each of these, there's not just the cooking portion, but also the prep portion, which takes up a lot of our time in the kitchen that a lot of cooking videos don't really take into account. They just assume you already have all of your ingredients neatly prepped in small bowls, ready for you to throw onto the stovetop. Now, as real people in real life, we know that's not actually the case. We actually have to put in work and time to prepare those ingredients ahead of time. So instead of just thinking about how we're going to cook the ingredients, we also need to think about how we're going to prepare them. Let's start with carbs. To me, carbs are going to be the easiest to handle. You can buy in bulk 2 to 3 of your favorite kinds of carbs that you can eat every day and pretty much forget about it for the next couple of months. For example, for me, I only really need to care about how am I going to cook my rice and how I'm going to cook pasta every once in a while as well. So for me, the best tools for this job are the Instant Pot in order to make my brown rice, and just a pot for the stovetop in order to boil my pasta. Now, you could save money by not getting an Instant Pot at all, but for a couple of reasons, I highly recommend getting one of these things because it not only is useful to cook things like rice, but there's like a million other options as to things you can do with it. For example, searing a steak after you're done finishing it, because the inside pot acts as a stainless steel pan. And it can also act as the pot that holds your water for a sous vide, which I will go into detail with later on in the video. Additionally, especially for brown rice, using an Instant Pot takes that margin of error and gives you a ton of space to work with. You can pretty much press a button and forget about it while you work on cooking other things, which is why I find this to be such a valuable tool in order to make home cooking easy. Now onto the first big hurdle that most home cooks trying to eat healthier face, which is the veggies. Everybody knows intuitively that veggies are good for you. Why is that? Well, the main reason is that they're low calorie and they're filling. But for a lot of us, even if we do have a flash of motivation, we go to the store, we buy a bunch of veggies, we throw them in the crisper jar in our fridge. A lot of the times, these end up just rotting and not getting a chance to be cooked and enjoyed. This is because they're annoying to prep and kind of easy to mess up when it comes to the execution. So we're gonna make that easier in 2 ways. 1, we're gonna make prepping the veggies less painful. And 2, we're gonna choose tools to cook our veggies that both are low maintenance and make them taste great. So as for prep, unlike with carbs when you can get away with just having 2 to 3 different options, in my opinion, with veggies, it's easier to get bored of eating the same veggies over and over again compared to carbs, in my opinion. So for veggies, I would recommend thinking of upwards of like 5 to 6 different options that you can see yourself enjoying. And if you can't think of 5 to 6 options, that just means you haven't tried enough veggies and tried different methods of preparing and cooking them to make them taste good. My previous video details a few ways to use the air fryer for this purpose. But as for prep, you need to find a way to slice your veggies easily. So for the very basics, any decent chef knife that's at the very least not completely dull and can be saved with a sharpening mechanism is good enough to go. And as an extra add-on, but highly recommended, buying a mandolin for your larger vegetables such as zucchinis and cucumbers, and then using the knife for some of these smaller items such as like slicing tomatoes and Brussels sprouts that aren't as easy to use with a mandolin. This combo will save you a ton of time on prep and make it easier to just throw a batch of cut veggies into the air fryer, which is the next tool I'm going to talk about. So when you hear the term air fryer, the first thing that comes to mind, at least for me when I was first hearing about it, is okay, it's an air fryer, so it's for like fried food, like French fries. And it's true, you can make some really delicious French fries with this, But that's kind of beyond the point for this video. I think the true secret behind the value of an air fryer is actually making everyday ingredients that are kind of boring and bland, such as most veggies, kind of come alive with very little effort and oil. The big benefit of the air fryer is you can get kind of a deep fried food experience, such as like a crispy Brussels sprouts, but with relatively little oil compared to, you know, a restaurant style Brussels sprouts that's just like completely covered with oil. For me personally, I also enjoy having like a steaming rack that I can put in my pot in order to steam certain specific veggies. For example, I love bok choy. And so for me, just having a steaming rack for bok choy that to go with Asian inspired meals is worth it for me. But I would say for most people, the air fryer covers many veggies. Any veggie that can be roasted in the oven is going to be better and cook quicker and easier in the air fryer. And last, but definitely not least, we're going to talk about proteins. Protein is the foundation of pretty much any macro conscious or fitness conscious meal. And typically, if you're trying to save money and be spending conscious as well, typically cheaper cuts of meats are going to also be leaner and harder to cook right. For example, one gem of a find in Costco is you can buy like 7 pounds of pork for $15, which is I think less than the average Chipotle bowl. But pork can be notoriously tough and easy to overcook, just like chicken breast. And so that's where investing in a sous vide, I think, is more valuable than one might think. It sounds like a fancy gadget, and it is, but it's very much worth the money if you want to sustain eating leaner, cheaper cuts of meat without having to have perfect technique cooking it on the stovetop. And again, going back to the theme of ease and removing friction, all you have to do is take a piece of cut meat, use a vacuum sealer like this to help prep it and have like a week's worth of meat prepped and ready to go in the freezer. Take it out and then pop it into a warm bath of water with a sous vide. And then you can just leave and go on about your day, do something else for an hour or two, come back, and that meat will have cooked to a perfect tender temperature, pasteurized and killed all the bacteria without you having to pay any attention to it. They also often come with an app that you can control remotely in order to just tell it exactly how you want your meat cooked, and it will set it to the correct temperature and time in order for you to have it cooked perfectly without any effort at all. Again, yes, you could spend a lot of time perfecting your skills on the stovetop, but you could also spend your time and effort learning something else and just have the meat cooked perfectly for you for an extra couple of bucks. And outside of the beginner-friendly nature of having tools like a sous vide and an air fryer, it also lessens the amount of random gear that you're going to have to clean up after it's all said and done. So far, we've talked about having a pot to boil pasta, an Instant Pot, which I'm actually using that same pot in the Instant Pot here for the sous vide, and it adds a double use, and an air fryer. That's only 3 things that you have to end up cleaning and throwing in your dishwasher every single day. If you want to get fancier, you can, but when it comes to the bare minimum or the highest value tools and things to use as a part of your week-to-week routine, I think these really cover a wide base. And the last thing with proteins is I would probably recommend having some kind of external skillet or just additional piece of cookware that you can do all-purpose cooking on, such as like a pan that you can just buy from any Goodwill or a cheap one online on Amazon, just for like everyday all-purpose needs. But you can also use the Instant Pot to saute and do anything you need there too. But I would say like most of the time you'll find that you want something else to work with at the same time as you're having like the sous vide run, or it's maybe the Instant Pot's busy cooking rice. You're gonna need like some other tool to help you be more efficient. And yes, nowadays there are like plenty of $100 pans and skillets and cookware out there, but to start, it's really not necessary to spend on those things. And next, I'm going to go into a cost breakdown of everything I just talked about, and then compare that to what the alternative would be if you were to not cook at home. The one big question that goes through my mind whenever I watch certain videos like this, especially ones with a lot of purchase recommendations, is like, how much is this actually going to cost? Because not everyone has infinite money. In fact, the type of people that want to cook more at home, including me, are those that don't really want to spend a ton of money on food in the first place. So why would I invest a ton of money into buying a bunch of stuff? Isn't that like counterintuitive? Isn't that going against the whole idea of saving money on food? Well, not exactly. So as some context, I decided to go to the Bureau Labor Statistics data from like last year regarding the Phoenix area household spend on food. So the Phoenix area is where I live, so I just use that for a plain reference. But like most places outside of this, other than like New York, Seattle, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, are going to cost a little bit less than this, other than the top 5 major cities in the United States that maybe cost a little more. For some context, the data shows that the average household spends about 55% of their food at home and 44% away from home. However, takeout on average, or restaurant food on average, costs up to 3 to 5 times more than groceries. And I think this is actually being a little bit generous. I think on average, takeout and restaurants food, in my experience, maybe not in yours, but these days, costs way more than sometimes 3 times more than like a batch of groceries in terms of like per meal costs, right? Obviously with groceries, like if you buy a steak, it's going to cost $45 for like 3 steaks. If you go to a steakhouse and you order 3 steaks, you're paying out $200, right? So I think this is like a very reasonable assumption to make, that takeout is about 3 times more than groceries. So with that assumption in mind, converting that cost to if that same person was to spend that money on groceries instead, and then doing some math that you can pause and look on the screen in order to generate the average amount of savings per year and savings per month that you would get from eating more at home versus out of the house. And then on the left here, what I have is a couple different like examples of how much it would cost you in order to buy the setup that I suggested in the video. I looked at like on the one side, like a more bougie luxury setup where you're buying like the best stuff possible and how much that would cost. Obviously there's like really, really expensive stuff, but I would say like for highest quality gear, like it would probably cost you $1,000-ish for everything that I just mentioned. But you don't need that. In fact, I don't have most of the stuff on this list. I probably spent a little bit extra on the mandolin because I wanted that luxury. I spent a little bit more on a gigantic cutting board because it looks nice. And that's it. For everything else on this list, I have the cheapest option. So in total, the cheap option will cost you about $322. That looks like a ton of money if you're looking at that cost in terms of like just buying today. But considering that you could save $200, $300 a month, which I think is even conservative based upon like who's buying super expensive groceries. Like if you go to a place like Costco, you can buy in bulk. I mean, I feel like personally that there's a lot of savings opportunities even with the grocery estimates. So I feel like $200 of savings a month is on the lower side of the estimate, but we'll do that just to be safe. With that assumption, you're getting your investment paid back in less than 2 months. That's not even considering the benefits of cooking at home on your health. For the price of just like 1 to 2 months of takeout and restaurant food, you could instead invest in some gear that would make eating at home easier and be able to achieve both your health and also improve your financial life.